Good morning. First thing this morning, I put colors on these yesterday after the bonding primer, 2 coats, and 2 coats of base color. And I used all these colors here, which if you want to see the lids right there. And this morning I sanded it lightly and I need to make sure it's clean, wipe off the dirt with a roll of paper towel so you can see it's coming off. Just turn it a little and do it again. This is the main bathroom countertop. This one here is just in case we need to put something in the sinkhole of the main kitchen countertop because the sink don't fit. So I'm trying to be ready in case that happens. I'm getting ready to mix some epoxy, and since Janice is here to do the filming, then we'll show you how we do that. Take one of these containers, which always use a clean container, because you don't want any debris or anything in the container mixing with your epoxy. Of course, this is a garage and it has enough dirt out here anyway that gets in the epoxy. So make sure that your container is as clean as possible. This is the StoneCoteCountertops epoxy mix, parts A and B. B is the hardener, but it is thinner than A, so you put B in the container first, and you do want to watch your measurements because you want the same amount of both. Now, I actually want a quart of this, so I'm going to have to open another one. But while I'm opening the other one, I'll let this one drain completely. Luckily, we just got a new shipment yesterday, or I wouldn't have enough of this to do the job today. They keep these things pretty well sealed. Okay, I got a quart of part B in there. hopefully I'll get a cord of part A out of here. And for some reason it seems like I always measure it, but it seems like I'm using more of part B. And as you can see, part A is really thick. So it takes a while for it to run out. Like I said, I always measure this, and it's equal parts of part A and part B. So I had 1 quart of part B, and I want 1 quart of part A, which would put me up to 2 quarts. And I'm almost there, if you can see that. So I'm going to stop right there. Now I take the drill, and you want to hang on to your containers so that it doesn't spin on you and end up on the floor spilling all this stuff. And if you can see on the floor, Janice will show you the floor, we have one brown paper, and there's 2 sheets of plastic on top of that, and it looks awful dirty, which it is, but that's keeping the epoxy and paint and everything off the floor. Now this stuff turns kind of a creamy white at first, but you keep mixing it and it'll turn semi-clear again. And you want to make sure you mix it up really well. I just put a board down to hold this up and let that drip all over this tabletop here, because I'm going to throw this away when I'm done anyway. This is a 1/8 by 1/8 square notch trowel, and as you can see, I've used it with this epoxy a lot. When you're done with it, you set it like this so the stuff will run off, which keeps the notches clean. Now you pour this on. And that's probably enough, but I have that other one to do, so I'm going to set that aside. They don't recommend doing that. They recommend that when you mix the stuff up, you only mix what you're going to use on that piece, and I guess I've done larger pieces and really thought that I would need that much for both these pieces, which it looks like half what I mixed would have been enough. But you move this stuff around with your 1/8 by 1/8 notch trowel, and as you can see, it runs all over the edges, but you want to get it on the edges of the piece, the edges that will be against the wall. You want to try to wipe that off if you can. These other edges that are going to be shown, you want to get epoxy on them too, which I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And the center here, where the sink's going to go, you want to try not to get too much there, but if you do, that's okay. You'll clean that off here in a minute. As you can see on this piece, and I think I mentioned that earlier, I've already put color on it, 2 base coats, and then some other Rust-Oleum paints. And you make sure you get it everywhere equally, and it looks like I have it on all the edges.
Can you put a little more?
What?
Can you put more on this end? It's kind of, yeah.
You don't want to put any pressure on your trowel, because if you do, you'll scratch it, which doesn't really matter because the scratches won't show, but it might dig up some of the paint, and then it'll look like you have dirt in your epoxy. Now I'm trying to get some of this to go over this edge over here where it's going to be shown, and this edge over here. Now after you get it all moved around, as I said, I set this trowel so that it will drain away from the notches. And I take a paintbrush, and this is a relatively good paintbrush. It's a Wooster 2-inch wall and trim angled paintbrush, and I take it over here to the trash can and try to make sure there's no loose bristles. And you make sure you have a good start of epoxy on your brush. And the first thing I'm doing here is chopping the edge, which there's not really enough there to chop, so I'm going to put some more there. But you make sure the edges are all covered. It will be thinner than the top, thinner coverage than the top, because it runs off. And of course it runs all over the floor. So then, after you get that done, and you try to get all the edges so you don't have any drips running down there, then you start chopping the top. And this is what you do. The purpose of this is to make sure that you have uniform coverage, and you're trying to get all the bubbles out of it.
I don't know if they can see the bubbles or not.
If you have bubbles after you chop it, that's okay. You'll use a torch later to get those bubbles out. But you want to chop the entire surface at least once. Sometimes I chop it more than once if it looks like I have an area that doesn't have enough or something to that effect. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but as you can see, I have some wood chips under the sides in some places. If you don't have your piece level, then your epoxy will not be uniform. It will run off. And anyway, you got to have your piece level. I try to get it perfectly level, but I'm sure that it's not perfect. And another reason you want to have some things under your piece is because if you have it flat on the table, this epoxy running off the edges is going to glue it to the table, and you're going to have a hard time getting it off of there. Okay, now I've done that. I'm going to set this brush over here because I'm going to use it over there. And I'm going to take a paint stick and I'm going to put some color in. I'm going to start with some black. And you want to shake it up well and spray it somewhere else. Make sure it sprays, and it don't. That one must be all plugged up, but I have a new one of that one. Now you take your spray and you spray it on the stick, and you run that stick through the epoxy. And we're making a line here. It'll look like a seam that will look like it was made that way by nature.
A vein.
A vein, not a seam, I'm sorry. Thank you, dear. And you want to make sure your color comes over the edge too, because that seam actually goes all the way through your piece. I mean, if you were getting granite or something that was actually mined and cut, it would be all the way through your piece. And so you want to make sure that color comes over the edge. Now, I think the guys on YouTube from StoneCote would use a different paint stick, but I just wipe it off. And I'm going to use some silver metallic now. Make sure that it sprays good too. And don't put it on your piece until you want it to be there, and put it where you want it to be, because if you stick it out there somewhere, it's going to drip on your piece and you're going to have a drip where you don't want it. Now this is metallic copper. And I'm going to run some of it through there too. And it doesn't have to be in the same place, the right place. There is no wrong place. You just run it through there, and you can see maybe that this stuff is blending in this seam, vein. Why do I keep calling it a seam when it's a vein? But you also can take your torch and you can move this around. You see the colors moving? How's that look, dear?
Good.
Does it need more of anything?
I don't think so.
So there's the vein, or seam as I've been calling it. So we're going to leave that the way it is. I think that's all right, pretty good. Do you like it, dear?
Yes.
I want to put my stick over here and leave it. Now over here on this side, I want to do something different. I put some color there, and I'm going to put some metallic black on it. And make sure you get it on the edges too. I sometimes forget that, and as I did better, if you look at the first pieces, the edges aren't so good, but as I've done more, the edges are a little better, and I'm trying to wipe the drips off, but now this is a metallic bronze powder, and it comes in a bag from StoneCote, and you mix it with a half of the bag. You mix it with 6 ounces of 91% alcohol, and I'm going to spray this on here. And you might be able to see what it's doing. That sometimes happens. And I want to put a little of this over here too. And as you can see, my sprayer is spitting a little, but it really won't. It'll look okay. Does it look okay?
Yes.
I forgot to put some on the edge there. So is that enough color, dear, or do you want some more? If so, what do you want?
Jimmy wants something here.
What would you like?
Maybe, I don't know.
And what I'm doing right now, there's some voids. It looks like places where the epoxies run over the side, and so there's a dimple there. And there's a few places that I see small bubbles, and I'm trying to take out the bubbles. And I was trying to move some epoxy into those voids, but it seems like all it's doing is moving the color out of those voids, so I'm going to leave that alone. We have to put another coat of clear epoxy on here, so I'm going to try to make sure those voids get filled in. As I said, the one purpose of doing this torching is moving the paint around so you like it. Another purpose is getting the bubbles out, moving the epoxy into any voids or places like that. What do you want there?
I don't know.
You want some dark, or you want another seam?
I don't know. Copper.
Huh? You don't want more of this or that.
No.
Okay, Janice wants something here, so I'm gonna make another vein.
Can you go over to that one?
How about I come out here and go?
Okay.
So I'm starting with metallic black, like I did on this one, and I'm gonna have it come out of here and just sort of go like that.